All right, so let's get this started. Hello, everybody. My name is Nick. I am the owner of Curve Breakers, and tonight we're going to be talking about preparing for finals. I'm going to give you guys also a little bit of a personal anecdote as well. When I was a student early on, I guess in high school, studying for big tests was something that I always struggled with. And as I got later in my academic career, I got very good at studying for these kind of comprehensive exams. So I'm going to try to bestow that knowledge upon all of you tonight. We're going to go over just some basic strategies for studying for finals, and I'll also tell you some things that have worked for me. One thing I'll definitely add is everybody's different. I think we're going to go over a lot of different study tips, and you have to find which ones work best for you. That's kind of the main thing about learning in general, right? Like we're all different, we learn different ways, and we need to figure out what works best for us. If anyone has any questions at any point in time, feel free to just type it in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'll definitely answer them in real time. This shouldn't take too long, but I want to provide you guys with some information on how we can do better on these kind of comprehensive tests. So a little bit of background on myself and the company. I started Curve Breakers about 10 years ago. My main goal was to provide test prep and tutoring for students to help them boost their grades, boost their test scores. All of our programs are designed to help students in those endeavors, and we work with each family individually. So a lot of my time is spent talking to parents, talking to students, and making sure that everybody's on the same page and that we're all doing well. So that's kind of a little bit about what I do. Generally speaking, we help students with a variety of different tests. So, from math to science, English, obviously standardized tests, regents, APs, all that good stuff. So, if you have any questions, of course, throw those in the chat. So what are we going to cover tonight? A little bit about understanding the exam. That's probably the most important part for preparing for a comprehensive exam, is actually understanding what you're actually going to face on the actual test, actually studying for the exams, preparing a plan for yourself, some general study techniques, ways to manage stress, hugely important. A lot of people get very stressed, myself included, during standardized tests and big exams, and then also some test-taking strategies, and then some resources that we have to support students in those endeavors. So that's what we're going to go over tonight. So let's talk about understanding the exam. I think this is probably the most underrated part of studying for finals or for any kind of comprehensive test. You really need to understand the syllabus. And what I would always start with is that, to go back to my personal anecdote that I didn't really fully explain, when I arrived at college, I was very, good student. I did well on standardized tests, but I wasn't great at finals and exams in school because I just had poor study habits. I just really didn't know how to study, and I just wasn't very good at it at that time. But what happened was is kind of luck, I guess, in a sense. I was a recruited athlete, so I played soccer, and one of the other players on the team, I became very close with him, still close with him to this day. He's a great person, great business person, and a great friend. And he was very studious, and I was not, right? So we became friends, and I guess his studious nature started to rub off on me, and he did very well in school. He had a great GPA. He was taking very difficult classes. I was taking easier classes than him, and he was in a kind of a pre-med type of program. So he had a lot of hard stuff from the beginning, right? And he was doing very well, and I was kind of struggling that first semester of college, where my GPA wasn't exactly what I would have expected. So, him and I sat down, and we were studying together for finals, and he had all these techniques and all of these, these various ways that he went about it, and those rubbed off on me. And the main ones being outlining, right? He taught me how to outline for a test. Basically, take the syllabus, take the important pieces of information, write it down in a document, and that's like your golden rule for the exam. Like, you take that document, you print it out, you take it with you, you write notes on it, and it keeps morphing over time. It keeps expanding. And I picked up that kind of outlining strategy for final exams and comprehensive exams, and that helped me so much. And then for the rest of college, I had a 4.0. So that moment, that just learning how to study for exams, transformed my ability to do well in college. And that has transferred even beyond that in law school and so on and so forth. Even just in general life, like being more organized and creating a study plan for myself. going into that first point there, giving myself adequate time to prepare for the test was huge for me. Everyone knows, like, people love to wait till the last minute to do these things. And what I did was, as like a kind of a running rule for myself, I would always make sure to give myself at least 1 week to study for an exam. So if I had, several finals, I could find the time to study for all of them at the same time. That's one of the things I think students, especially high school students, really struggle with, is the time management aspect. And that's probably something that I struggle with, frankly. So looking at it that way and saying, okay, if I give myself a week, then I have enough time to allocate to all types of different exams. Whereas if you're doing everything the night before, then you don't really have the time to fully prepare for the exam. Or if you need an extra day, or you realize, oh wow, I'm looking over this information and I don't really get it. I'm not there yet. You still have a whole week to figure it out. Depending on the person, maybe you want to expand that or shorten it. I mean, I would probably go on the side of expanding it. Maybe you need 2 weeks, depending on the nature of the exam, how big it is, and how well you're doing in the class. For a class you're doing really well and you feel like you know all the information, probably don't need as much time. But if you're not doing as well and you do need more time to study, maybe you need 2 weeks. But giving yourself that time, blocking that out, and blocking out specific study time is so helpful. I vividly remember those experiences in college, locking yourself in the library for, a week or 2 weeks before finals, and that really helping me, not kind of leaving it to whim or, leaving it to the night before. So that's like very important, knowing the date of the exam. I know that sounds very rudimentary, but it's just so important. What's the format? I mean, that's also hugely important when we get into the test taking strategies. Is it a multiple choice exam? Is it a written response? Like what is the nature of the exam? Is it cumulative, right? Do I have to learn an entire year of material? Do I have to learn, the last semester, the last quarter? I mean, what is on the exam is just hugely important. I know a lot of times this is challenging. I think that was one of the difficulties that I faced in high school as opposed to college. I think as you get further along your academic career, the exams become a little bit clearer. They're very forthcoming with what the test is going to be on, because you have to learn more complicated information. I think sometimes in high school, students get surprised, and maybe that's just because they're not prepared. Like, oh, I didn't expect what was on the exam. I think same thing goes for the SAT or the ACT or Regents or an AP. Like, for those exams, we know what's going to be on the exam. It's standardized, right? We know what's going to be on the SAT. We know what's going to be on the ACT. We know what's going to be on a Regents to some degree. Obviously, we don't know exactly what's going to be on it, but we can look at prior tests as a way to prepare ourselves. So we're talking about a Regent exam, we're talking about an AP. One of the best ways to prepare is looking at prior tests, because that helps you understand the format, helps you understand what's likely to be on the exam, questions they ask every time, and that could be hugely helpful. Like I said earlier, understanding whether the test is multiple choice, free response, true, false, essay, whatever the test is, you want to prepare yourself for that exact format. And you can see this funny little, my marketing team made this presentation, so I love these little jokes they put in here. This picture of Oprah. You read the syllabus, you don't get a car, but you are on your way to getting a grade, right? Reading the syllabus, like understanding the structure. The syllabus is a great way to start your outlining for an exam. So that's really an important piece of information. And if you don't have it, you have to ask your teacher, ask a friend, make sure you get that in your hands. If you're a parent trying to help a student, the first thing we always ask, if a parent is seeking tutoring from us for an exam, please send us the syllabus. Send us the last few tests the student took. Like, send us that information, and you can look at it and say, okay, where are we going wrong? What do we need to know? So on and so forth. So that's just like hugely important. And if the student's not looking at the syllabus before they take a final comprehensive exam, that's a huge mistake, right? So definitely take a look at that. For creating a study schedule, I think being very specific about this was something that really helped me. Like I was saying earlier, giving you that personal anecdote, like giving myself a week and locking myself in the library for that period of time. And I knew exactly where I was going. We had the same room, the same nook that we studied in. Like we all went there, from morning to night, preparing for these exams. That's so important, right? So you don't have that guesswork of like, where do I need to go? What time am I going to do this? Like, oh, I'll do it whenever. Like, that's not a good plan, right? You need to have the time that you're going to be studying for each exam, especially if you have multiple exams, like something like end of year finals. You might have 5 or 6 tests. Block off time for each one so that it's allocated, and that really helps students, I think, one of the biggest issues looking at myself as a high school student, time management, the organization. I just let all that, I just did everything randomly, and that was not successful, right? So being more organized about it, being more detailed, writing it out, I think that's a strength that some students have that really does help them a lot. So that goes into like, where will you study? What time will you study? I really love, and one thing that I really carried throughout college and law school that I didn't really have in high school was going to an external place like a library, I think is really helpful. It puts you in that mode, when you're at home, there's a lot of distractions, you might have a dog, you might have siblings, like there's chaos going on. That can be very distracting when you're trying to study. A family member comes over, grandma's here, and now, and 2 hours is chewed out of the study time. But if you're at the library, no one's really going to bother you unless you see someone that you know. So that's why we would always do that. We never study in our room. Looking back at myself in high school, I really would have loved to go to my school library or the local library or someplace quiet, or maybe not so quiet, Starbucks, whatever, where you're just there to study. You know what I mean? And you don't have to worry about the external distractions. And learn, thinking about what material it would be focusing on. Like if you have a week to study for a final and there's, several units in the course, that you make sure you take care of each unit in succession so that okay, I know this, now I can move on to something else. I understand this, I can move on to something else. And then, of course, like giving yourself, time for, obviously take a break once in a while, your other extracurricular activities, if you have practice, something like that, building all that stuff in, hugely important. You can see like this little, school profile. Okay, these are my finals that I have on different days. So I'm gonna organize my studying, according to that schedule. So making sure you have all the dates correct and that you're really like giving yourself that plan. All right, so how do we do this plan? I think starting the planning process early is hugely important. I think time is the biggest barrier to doing well on a test. If you don't have the time, you theoretically could have done well if you started a week before. So that's something really important. Start early. So if my finals are in 2 or 3 weeks from now, I want to plan out the schedule, plan out my study time now, maybe start chipping away at it. That's a really great way to make sure that I'm successful. Using a planner is really helpful too. I think that was something that I picked up in college, was to have a daily planner. At that time, they were all paper. You had the yearly book. You could write down notes in the various days. You could really do a lot with that in terms of organization. Now, of course, they have all these things digitized. You can use Google Calendar. There's different apps you can use like Notion. There's a lot of note-taking apps now that are really helpful. There's even ones that now have AI involved. They can summarize text for you, all that good stuff, right? So those things can be really helpful, leveraging that kind of technology. If you have to use an iPad in school, it's so easy now to take notes if you have the Apple Pen, and just generally speaking, like it really kind of facilitates your study for finals. And then like you can see there, the physical planner, it may be an old school method for a lot of students, but it is nice to have that, just handy. I think there's something hugely beneficial about writing. It's been statistically proven in many studies that handwriting notes really does help retention. So obviously you can type things, that's helpful as well. But I think sometimes, common study strategy, you may have heard people rewrite their notes over and over. And as they're writing it, they think about it, and that really helps some people absorb information. So maybe that's something to try as well for a lot of students. Like I said earlier, eliminating the distractions, hugely important. I think that was my biggest issue. And as I got to college, I was able to work that out. Spacing out your practice time, if you have to do practice tests, like say for a Regents exam, planning that out. That's where you may need more than a week, right? Like I want to do a practice Regents and grade myself and see where I stand. And then I have time to now study. So say I do that practice Regents, 2 weeks before the test, I realize, oh, I didn't do that well on the multiple choice part, right? Or written response, whatever the case may be. Now I have time to fix that. We do give practice Regents exams at our office. So if anyone, needs to like get an approximation of what their grade would be, we can produce that for you. So that's something, that a service that we provide. It's actually free. We don't have a problem with students coming to do that. Obviously, a lot of them seek tutoring when they when they see they didn't do so well. So, we're more than happy to provide that. Sometimes, switching between subjects can actually be helpful, because sometimes you get burnt out, doing one thing for an extended period of time, and that can be helpful to just change gears. So if I'm studying for my math test for a long time, sometimes burnt out with numbers for a second, let me switch over to English and spend a few hours on that. That can just give me that change of pace that's needed to reinvigorate myself. Or maybe I switch from a subject I don't like so much to one that I do like, and that could really help me be more engaged and because that's the problem with studying the day before the test, right? You got to spend the whole day studying for that one test, and there's this diminishing returns at some point in time, right? So to avoid that, giving yourself the planning goes into this, right? If I plan certain blocks of time for each exam, then I'm not going to have so much of an issue of getting burnt out with the material. So I think that's another thing that's really helpful. Then you got to give yourself breaks. We're going to go over some of the names of various studying strategies, and a lot of them include giving yourself short breaks. I think 5 minutes to clear your head really helps when you're studying for a comprehensive exam. Maybe you'll get a coffee, or you get a snack and then get right back to it. Can be very helpful. All right, so some general study techniques. Let's talk about some active learning strategies. Engaging with the material is hugely important, right? So this is what I was talking about earlier. Summarizing notes, right? So if your teacher or professor gives you a huge amount of notes that are way too large to study for an exam, say an AP exam or a Regent, right? Like it's just too long. Boiling that down, summarizing that can be hugely helpful, and it's a great study tactic, right? It really helps you absorb that information. Working with others, asking each other questions, quizzing each other. That's one of the ways that studying with someone else can be very helpful, especially if they're a high achieving student and they really want to do well as well. Obviously, you're not getting distracted or wasting time, but that could be really helpful because you have someone to bounce ideas off of. If there's something you don't understand, then maybe they understand it, they can explain it to you. If there's something they don't understand, you can explain it to them. Explaining things to other people is one of the best ways. A lot of times for English-based exams, history, stuff like that, I would actually talk out the concepts. Like I would speak them. It's a little bit faster than writing them. If I felt like I really understood it, I would say it out loud. I would say it to someone else, and you can bounce ideas off each other. And that's a great way to prepare, and really improves retention. Of course, note-taking, this is really the most important piece. My personal thing, and as I said earlier, was the outlining. I created a master outline for each test. So if I was taking a Regents exam, I would create an outline for each test, make sure I know all the information in the outline. If that encompasses 90% of the information that could be on the exam, you're probably going to do really well on the exam if you know it all, right? It's a little bit different for something like math, right? Like there's more application involved, but for rote memorization, outlining is probably the best study strategy, other than some other things that may work for different individuals. Let's talk about the Pomodoro technique. So this is a great way to break up studying for people that feel like they get burnt out too quickly. Is where this technique is, this is proven to work, where you study for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break, and you keep repeating that. That's where you really get, like, you have to use that 25 minutes wisely, right? You really have to be focused, and then you let yourself be unfocused for 5 minutes, and then you go back to focus for 25 minutes, and then maybe you could be unfocused for 5 minutes. So out of an hour, you're getting 50 minutes of valuable study time. And that's a pretty good rate, because just sitting there for 4 hours, sometimes you really start losing the retention, and you really start losing the focus, right? So that can be hugely helpful, just giving yourself short breaks. Retrieval practice. This is another important thing, like retrieving the information is hugely important. I think, especially thinking back to my own experiences, where before I really learned how to study, I was studying the night before, the retrieval becomes the problem, right? Because you study all the information for an entire day, you know it, then you wake up the next morning and you forgot half of it, right? Now, if you had 7 more days or 6 more days, right, you're doing this for a week and you retained 50%, and then you do that each successive day, the next day you're at 75%, and then the next day you're at almost 90%. So like, that's why giving yourself multiple days is hugely important, because that eliminates any retention issues and gives you the time to continue to retain the information. Creating your own questions, like asking yourself questions. This goes back into like studying with someone else, why that's helpful. Creating questions, flashcards. We could talk about old school, methodology, right? Index cards, flashcards. I don't even know if students necessarily use those anymore. They have the digitized version. You have things like Kahoot, stuff like that, right? You really use those things. Sometimes you can find free quizzes online, making it yourself probably even better, and that's really helpful. And then using technology, things like Kahoot, various websites. I mean, for math, there's some great ones. There's Delta Math. What's the other one? There's another one I can't remember. There's one that makes questions for you on various topics and gives you study guides. A lot of teachers actually use it to create finals. It'll come to me later, but using technology, and you even have things like Khan Academy. If you need to learn basic stuff, you have a 8th, 9th grader, and you want to learn algebra or you want to learn geometry. There's really great websites like Khan Academy and other things that you can use. And then of course the note-taking technology can be hugely helpful. I think that would be something I definitely would use if I was in school now. So let's talk about some more study techniques. We have the Feynman technique, which is basically to explain concepts in your own words. And that's hugely important because, when you're talking about, say, like, a history exam, right? You can regurgitate information, but, when you're asked to write an essay about it, you have to be able to explain it. You can't just kind of, rotely write down facts, right? You have to synthesize them together. So being able to explain concepts is hugely important. That's a great study strategy, right? Like I said earlier, you have someone else to bounce it off, or even just by yourself, like explaining things out loud can be really helpful. The Lightner system is basically a system of flashcards where you use different boxes to, and track them, and you can kind of like retire the ones keep the ones you don't know. That's why flashcards are great, because you can kind of make piles, right? Like, these are things I know, these are things I don't know, and that's a great way to study. It also, creating them is, takes effort, right? But it's just creating the flashcards is a great study skill and study habit. Color coding your notes, that was definitely something I did with the outlining, like things I didn't know, you could highlight in a certain color. Things you do know, you could highlight in green. Things you don't know, you could highlight in red. And that's a great way to go back to your notes, make sure that you learn everything. And then some other little things like, studying before you go to bed. I mean, that, is great because a lot of times that's just downtime, right? You have a few hours before bed, you're relaxing, you can quickly review your flashcards, review your notes. I always kept my study guides for each final. I would create a study guide for each final. Usually I try to keep them under, 5 to 10 pages would be the max. Sometimes I use small font if it was a complicated subject, but reviewing that before I went to bed, reviewing it when I got up. These are great ways, even just, if you have 5 pages of notes, to read through them before you go to bed is a great way to help retain information. And then the big thing, and this is probably the most important thing, if we're talking about Regents, reviewing the old Regents papers. And this website here, they publish tons of Regents on the New York State website. You can download them. These are the ones that we give students as practice tests. They also have the answers, so you can, it's not like you just have the test, you also have the answers. And going through those tests, doing them, evaluating your answers, that's really, in my opinion, for a standardized test, the best way to go about it. And that can be hugely helpful from a study perspective, to just review what you got wrong, read the answer explanations. I mean, that's all very helpful stuff, especially for long answer prompts and stuff like that. All right, so let's talk about some stressors, right? And these obviously are things that can get in the way of being successful on exams. Having too heavy of a workload. I mean, this is why the time management, point 1 and 2, time constraints and heavy workload, go hand in hand, right? You have too much to do in a short amount of time, you just get overwhelmed, right? And then you feel very stressed. So, planning things out in advance and not having time constraints really can lessen your workload and make it feel more easy. I mean, by the time I was done with college, I kind of looked forward to the end of year tests, because I felt like I really had a plan and a system, and it became very easy. And I turned something that was stressful into something that I felt like I had control over. So when you feel like you have control over something like this, then it makes you feel much better about it. And then you perform better on the day of the test. I think, the stress of being unprepared, if 70% of the information, but you feel extremely unprepared, then you might not perform as well in the exam. Whereas if you knew, slightly more information, but you felt prepared and you felt confident, then you're going to do a lot better. And that goes into that performance pressure and fear of failure. When you didn't prepare for an exam, then sometimes you perform worse because you start feeling sad about it, or upset at yourself for not taking the time out and really studying for the test in the proper way. and that places more performance pressure on you. So all of these things are exacerbating factors that work together. I don't have enough time. Now I'm stressed. I'm overworked. I'm studying late. Now I'm tired. The next day, it all just keeps snowballing, right? So once you have the system in place, then a lot of these things are alleviated. And that's why creating a system that works for you is so important. Obviously, lack of preparation. I didn't even read that yet. Sleep deprivation. This is what can happen when you're cramming for exams. You start feeling unprepared. So losing sleep over it. I vividly remember like studying for the bar exam. You're studying for that test for months, and people are getting really freaked out about it and like kind of overdoing it at the end, and that sometimes is really bad. That's a kind of test that you need to study for months for, right? So talking about a final in school or a Regents exam for a high schooler, being sleep deprived is really not good for people at a young age, especially for performing on exams. So that's why, putting all these things into perspective is hugely important. And then balancing your responsibilities is just hugely important. Like you're going to have other things that come up. You have, extra activities, you have sports practice. That's why you really got to build up the time. Sometimes surprise things, who knows what could happen that could take up your time. You got to go somewhere or something happens, So giving yourself a 2-week window before Regents is hugely important. And you can see the little joke here with Jim from The Office, if anyone's familiar. You see the first question on your final, and you already know you're going to. Hopefully not. Hopefully that's not the case. You can see that that kind of smug look on his face. That we've all been there at some point in time, but we'd rather not. So managing stress. I mean, you have to find time to take care of yourself. And I think that's the other thing. People really drive themselves into the ground studying for exams, and that's not helpful, right? So getting adequate sleep, eating well, making sure that you're not skipping meals and your nutrition is getting poor. Calming yourself down. I mean, I can't say that I've been huge into meditation, but for a lot of people, it works really well. Or at least just breathing, like just, calming yourself down. I think, testing anxiety is a real thing that can be overcome by being prepared and, not putting too much pressure on yourself. Having social support. I mean, having friends that are taking the exams with you and you're studying with them, that makes you feel a lot better about it, especially if you all prepare together and you all feel like you adequately prepared, kind of lift each other up and build each other's confidence. That would be the hope. Obviously, if someone's being negative, then you probably don't want them in your study group. But at the same time, you want positive people who are studious. So many things in life, this is like, makes me sound old saying this, but like, the people you surround yourself with a lot of times rub off on you, whether it's positively or negatively. And I've seen that, in my life and, in my academic career, telling you guys about my friend who influenced me positively to be a better studier, a better student. Having friends that study and actually care about exams, you got to find them right before the test. If you don't have them, if your friends aren't super interested in school, not saying they don't, they don't need to be your friends. Obviously, school doesn't necessarily dictate whether someone's a good or a bad person, right? But excuse me, at the same time, you want to be around people who are taking the final exam seriously, are taking Regents seriously, and that will actually help you a lot. Students tell me this all the time, like their friend that, that works with me is doing really well, and that's like motivating them to do better, or, their friend group is really smart and that motivates them to like study more with them. And it all kind of like works in conjunction with one another. So I think that's hugely important, and it's a good mantra for life. You want to surround yourself with people that are going to, be positive, build you up, but also like, make you try to get better. And that's a great thing to look at. And then, like I said, with those study strategies, having those 5-minute breaks, picking something relaxing, listen to music, read a book, of leisure. I mean, for students, it'd probably be, using their phone or, going on social media. As long as you limit that time to something extremely limited, like 5 minutes, it's not gonna be a big deal. When you get sucked into the rabbit hole of scrolling, that's not good, right? So maybe you want to put the phone down for study time and have, use a book. That's why that might be good, is like get away from the phone. I think for students now, I think putting the phone down, putting it on do not disturb, putting it in, in their room and going to the library without those distractions can be hugely, hugely helpful. I mean, that's just so important. I think the phone is probably the biggest distractor for students. So yeah, limiting distractions, like maybe keeping your phone locked up for for the day while you study, you know, or checking it at certain times. I know for all of us, even at work, right, it's like just very distracting to have the phone around and, you know, buzzing, beeping. I mean, you got to just put all that stuff on silent. So let's talk about some multiple choice test taking strategies. I think the biggest mistake students make on multiple choice questions is they just don't read things carefully enough, especially the answer choices. I think that's a huge issue, is that students may read they know I have to read this carefully, they read the question carefully, then they don't read the answer choices carefully. One time, it was a long time ago, I my girlfriend at the time was a speech language pathologist, or was training to be one, and she was preparing for the board exams, whatever those were. She was doing some practice tests, and like I jumped in there, it was multiple choice. I have no idea what any of this is about, honestly. Like I just had no clue, and I took a practice test online as a joke, and I actually passed the board exam for speech language pathology, like a shortened version. You know, it was like 20 questions, something like that, because I just used process of elimination and really tried to eliminate answer choices that seemed absurd and ridiculous, and then take my best guess on what was remaining. So on these kind of tests, they do that. I mean, that's just how it's the only way it can be fair. You know, all four answer choices can't be viable. Obviously, one is correct, two are usually ridiculous, and then one is close, right? And if you can identify what makes something close but not right, you can do well on multiple choice tests, no matter what they are, you know, and that's something that I really try to, you know, get across to students, and that our tutors try to get across to students. You know, you don't have to do things in order. You can answer the easier questions, the ones you know first. Obviously, you have to like know what you're doing and make sure to fill out your Scantron the right way. But really reading the answer choices and paying attention to qualifiers, right? So usually none, always, never, except, all but the following, the best, the least. Extreme answers are usually wrong, right? Like what if you wanted to talk about something that always happens, it's almost I don't think you can even name something that would always happen. Think about that for a second. Like, would the sun always exist? I mean, in our lifetime, it will, hopefully, or else we're dead. But realistically, trillions of years from now, the sun will explode in a massive supernova, right? So you can't even say that the sun will always exist. It'll exist for trillions of years, but that's not always, right? So if you go, like, you operate on these technicalities and you really nitpick words, this is how you can do well on multiple choice exams without knowing the right amount of information. One time, I would say this had to be 4 or 5 years ago. I was working with a student on a history regents exam, and this student had failed the exam, and his school basically wrote him off. They said he's probably not going to pass the exam. Nothing really we could do. I tutored him for like 2 weeks, and I told him just to just pick the answer. Like if the question is about Europe, like pick the name that sounds European. Like it was a ridiculous thing. It was really just like operate with logic, and like to say, okay, don't know who, you know, circumnavigated the globe, right? But they're telling me that the person was from Europe. So I'm going to pick the name that sounds like they're from Europe. Like, and he got like a 87 on the test. And this is from failure to and being written off to now getting almost a 90 on the exam, right? Merely just on process of elimination and multiple choice taking strategies. So I think that's the biggest thing, definitely on Regents exams. I hear this all the time. Parents always tell me, you know, my student had a 99 in the class and then got a, you know, 82 on the Regents, or whatever, you know, 77 or something, or, you know, just significantly lower. And a lot of that has to do with preparedness for the test. Not to criticize schools by any means, but a lot of times, you know, individual teachers do a really good job of preparing students for Regents exams or comprehensive exams. Other teachers don't do as much of a good job, or they don't give out prior test papers, they don't go over them. Like this is, it's very mixed in terms of like what actually happens. But to prepare yourself for a test, you got to like go into it with a strategy, with a plan, done practice tests, know exactly what to expect, know the format, and have all that figured out, you know. And then like things like just eliminating ridiculous answer choices, using the options as clues to what the answer is. And there's all these things you can do depending on the subject. Obviously, math, you know, a little bit less. I mean, maybe you could plug in the answer choice or something like that, or you know, something like physics, right? Like you need to know how to do the calculations, you know the formulas. This is a different study style, right? You just need to make sure you know that stuff and how to apply it. Whereas like on a history or, you know, psychology test, like it's more retention and regurgitation, you know. So it really just depends on the type of exam, like what your study habits need to be. A lot of students you have true and false components to things, especially in high school. Like qualifiers are usually false. No, never, none, every, all, always, only, entirely. Like I said earlier, something that always happens or never happens. Those are like few and far between, so those are usually false. Qualifiers that fall between extremes are usually true. So like something seldom happens, it's likely that it's true. Because you could basically say anything could seldom happen. Sometimes, often, frequently, most, many, few, some, usually, generally, ordinarily. Those leave room for possibilities, right? Most of the time, I am good at this, right? That accounts for making a mistake. Like most of the time, pro athletes make the shot, right? It depends on the sport, right? But you could say most of the time, but to say all the time or every time is not going to be accurate. So that's going to be false. And most of the time or some of the time, right, that could be true. So you could see how that can affect your strategy. And then on most of these exams, you don't want to leave anything blank, especially if it's multiple choice. And obviously, if your teacher has some weird rule or there's like a penalty for wrong answer, something like that, this wouldn't apply. But in most instances, you want to make sure to just answer everything, especially, I mean, something like true, false, or multiple choice. I mean, true, false, you have 50-50, right? Multiple choice, there's 4 choices, you have 25% chance of guessing it. If you can remove the 2 ridiculous answers, then you have a 50% chance of guessing it. You got to give yourself a shot. And it's another big mistake students make, especially if they're not prepared for the test taking aspect of an exam, right? That's where these kind of mistakes creep in and that lowers their score. So you want to make sure you got all those things worked out. Let's talk about some test taking strategies for open response questions. Once again, you don't want to leave anything blank. Maybe you can earn some points depending on how your teacher grades things or what kind of exam it is. If you're unsure, you have to be able to, put something, right? Spit out some general facts about the topic and earn some points, right? Like that's just a thing that some students say, like, I don't really know the answer to this, so I'm just going to put nothing. That is bad, right? You want to try to put something. Sometimes you get some, credit from your teacher for effort, you know what I mean? Or even on a Regents exam, an open response question, if you put something relevant down, you might gain a few points, and that's good. Much better than getting 0, right? Obviously, if you're typing something or writing something, you want to check your grammar and spelling, make sure you're not making any errors, and you want to consider, how much space you have. I think that's on Regents exams, especially, that could be an issue where you have limited space to write something. You want to make sure that you can use that wisely, and that goes into planning and preparing yourself for the test. Let's talk about some test taking strategies for essays or for long responses, right? Budgeting your time. This is where time can really get the best of students because you do have a lot to do. So you have to make sure that you're, focused and that you're using your time wisely. Reading the essay question carefully. I think this comes up a lot on Regents exams where the question has a specific thing they want you to do. And if you don't listen to that specific thing and you do something close to it, but like slightly different, that they ask you to talk about, 1800s Ireland, and you talk about 1750 to 1800, but they didn't tell you to talk about that, all that information is not going to be graded or like gains no points, and that they just weren't asking you to do that, right? So you just have to be very specific in what they're asking you to do. And I think that's another mistake students make. Sometimes they get a shocking grade, like, how did I lose so many points? Well, you didn't answer that. You didn't answer the question that they gave you. You answered kind of your own question or some tangential question that you may have known more about. You can't do that on these kind of tests. Like, you have to try to answer what they're giving you. A lot of times before you start writing, it's great to do a memory dump. Just bust out all the facts that you have, and then you can compile that into an essay. You have a little outline, right? You create an outline, you dump the information, and then you piece it all together. Like that sometimes is effective for a lot of students. And then once again, like, on these kind of things, you want to make sure to have, correct spelling and grammar to the best of your ability. Obviously, if you're writing it by hand, that's going to be a little bit difficult. You want to do your best. It can be distracting. I think that's one of the biggest things. Like a sentence doesn't make sense because it's poorly constructed. Then the person kind of like reading it kind of lose interest or like kind of say, this sentence doesn't make sense. I'm not going to really waste my time thinking about it too much. Might have been something important, so you want to make sure to have the time to go back and proofread and check those things, Yeah, so what resources can students access? And this is all free stuff, right? Office hours with your teacher. I mean, spending time with the teacher, just, we're not talking about a standardized test, we're talking about like a final in school. Showing that effort a lot of times makes them side in your favor. This is another thing that I was very bad at in high school that I realized the importance of was just like, being active in class, after class, having the teachers view me positively, professors, where I was a studious person. I tried hard. I did things to the best of my ability, and sometimes that gets you that little leeway when you may have made an error where they say, you know what, I really like Nick. He's a good kid. He's really trying hard. Let me give him the benefit of the doubt. Whereas if you're like antagonistic and disruptive, or just like kind of defiant to the teacher's wishes, then sometimes they might say, you know what, Nick hasn't been the most pleasant, so I'm going to mark this wrong. Like especially if it's up to human judgment. Obviously, on a standardized test, multiple choice, it's a little bit fairer, but we got to be realistic about the realities of school and how things work. It's just hugely important. Like I said earlier, study groups, having a core group of people to study with, friends or not, who are taking the exam seriously, can just be extremely helpful. You could use YouTube. I mean, there's a lot of great YouTubers out there that do stuff, especially for things like history, math. I mean, you got to be a little bit careful. I mean, you got to make sure you're adhering to what your teacher wants, and what's going to actually be on your exam, not someone else's exam. But at the same time, if you need to like look up general information, that can be hugely helpful. Obviously, a tutor can be very helpful, especially something like a Regents exam, final exam, like really help you, give you that boost. You also have Reddit, which is a web forum where you can find a lot of information, some good, some bad. You have to be careful, but at the same time, you can find a lot of good stuff on there. The SAT studying group, I know because I'm part of it, on Reddit is very active. People are giving each other advice, they're helping each other out. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but you can get some good stuff out of things like that. And also old exams, right? So for things like Regents, like reviewing old exams is, I mean, this is the number one way to see what you don't know and help yourself prepare for the test. And then you also have study guides. So we actually sell study guides for very low cost for various exams, especially for APs. And I think we have some for Regents as well. Anyone interested in something like that is like a starting point, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help you. And those are, creating your own is probably the best thing to do. But if you want a starting point, a lot of times you can find one online. I mean, these things exist, so I would always do that too. I mean, that was a common practice in college, also in high school, right? Like you have an older sibling or a student that took the class last year that they have a study guide, they pass it down to you, and then you make it your own and you pass it down to someone else after. It keeps getting better year over year. That could be hugely helpful. Sometimes you even have some of the answers to the questions. I mean, that's, you don't want to do anything that's not gonna say illegal, but unethical. But at the same time, someone passing you a study guide, I mean, that's totally fine, right? So that could be hugely helpful. And then what do we do? Like, how can we assist? We have private tutoring. We have general tutoring for students that want to keep their grades up. We call that GPA support. Students use that year round. They can schedule sessions with their tutor to just kind of boost their grades and keep them engaged. We also have Regents review classes, which are very affordably priced, $99. Few hours of review before the exam. We go over the test format, how to take the test, and a very brief content review. If you don't know the content of the exam, it will still help you, but you really need to like learn and memorize the concepts. We will give out that information so you can study it. We position them a few days before the exam so you have time to continue your studying, so on and so forth. And then anyone has any further questions, they want to talk to me about their particular student, or they want to just go over something, that's what the consultation is for. We do that for free for students on any academic thing, whether it be general school grades, standardized tests, whether it be SAT, ACT, Regents, APs, and then also the college admissions process. You help with college applications, college essays. You just book the consultation. We'll tell you exactly how we can help you guys. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Any questions? I'll give you guys a few seconds if anyone has a question, and then I'll answer those, and then we'll take it from there. If you do have a question, you can just type it in the Q&A. I know sometimes people's questions are very particular or personal, like it's kind of about their student or about themselves. If you are a student, you can always, reach out to me directly. Just call the office, email me. I'm always happy to jump on the phone, jump on a quick consultation, discuss things like a lot of times it's like personal information, like I'm struggling in this class, like I need help, or what do I do with this, my student on this topic or this test or whatever the case may be. I'm always happy to have those conversations privately. I know sometimes people don't want to put their business out on these kind of webinars and things like that. So if you do have any, particular personal questions, of course, you can schedule a consultation, you can call me. But yeah, hopefully I helped you guys gain some study habits and skills. Oh, we do have one question. Great. Do I have any tips for the chemistry regions? That's a tough one. I mean, that's definitely more of a hybrid exam of both knowing the content and being able to apply it. So that's where you have to like know the concepts and you have to actually be able to apply them. So my main tip would be give yourself a prior Regents for chemistry. You can download it off the New York State website. We can also give it to you and see how you do, right? And then go from there. Be like, okay, these questions I got wrong. These are concepts I don't really understand, or I don't really know, or my teacher didn't cover, whatever the case may be. And then make sure to study those concepts. So that's really, it's one of the more challenging exams, I would say. It's a challenging subject matter. So I would definitely say like doing a practice test and being honest with yourself about where am I at, that can give you that springboard to say, okay, this is what I need to study. This is what I need to do, so for any region, especially something more technical like chemistry, physics, anything math related, you got to give yourself the test to see if you know the content that's actually going to be on the exam. Just because you're doing well in the school class doesn't mean you're going to do well on the Regents. You know what I mean? So that would be my advice there, is do the practice test, use that as a springboard to evaluate yourself, and then study what you don't know, That was a good question. Yeah, students, the most common things that we're tutoring students in, especially right now, algebra 2, geometry, physics, chemistry, biology, like the things that students tend to find more challenging to learn on their own. Those are some of the more common ones. And some of the tougher history subjects I think are very popular. A few English students as well, they would struggle with writing a little bit, answering the prompts. So, if you need any help, let us know. All right, well, thank you. Hopefully you guys picked up some good tips on studying. Hopefully my personal anecdote was helpful. I feel like that was the most valuable thing I could share with you guys, is how I transformed myself from, basically relying on my natural ability to actually learning how to study, creating a strategy that worked for me, which was outlining. That's what worked for me. And finding what worked for you, trying different things is very important. You go through that process. Okay, try this study habit. I tried this study skill, this methodology, flashcards, outlines, online tools, whatever the case may be. I found what works, and now I'm just going to do that all the time. Whatever works for me the best, I'm going to double, triple down on and make sure that I do well on these tests. So once again, thank you guys for joining on. I really appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me. All righty, thank you. Have a great night. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.